afternoon. Welcome to Why Shamanism Now, a practical path to authenticity, with your host, Christina Pratt, Director of the Last Mask Center for Shamanic Healing. She's talking about how shamanic skills can bring us to physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being, especially when nothing else can. Now, here's your host, Christina Pratt.
Welcome, everyone, to Why Shamanism Now, a practical path to authenticity. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. This is part 3 of a 4-part series. And for us to be able to do anything interesting today, we're going to call in the spirits to be with us. So I call in the ancestors. I call in your ancestors, all that is good and true and beautiful in your ancestral line and mine. Bring all that is good and true in my ancestral line to me, and let us acknowledge that it is their dreaming of a new future, of a possible future that brought us into existence. And let us live in a way in this day that makes that new future all we can possibly dream of. And I call in the energy of the earth below, that ancient and first ancestor for life as we know it. We call in that earth energy to acknowledge and give gratitude for a sense of home, a sense of connection, a sense of belonging, and the rest and rejuvenation and restoration that comes from this essential energy. And we raise our hearts up and our minds up, and we draw down the energy of the sky, the highest power of the universe, and we call it in, bringing us all the wisdom of the universe to guide us in this day, to bring us generosity and blessing, to bring us protection, that we might be held well in our cyberspace conversation. And finally, we call out to the energy of the heart, that energy that links and binds us all. We call out to this energy to be with us here today, that we may connect with the deeper energies of passion and the energies that come from the mind of clarity, and bring those two energies together in the heart, that each one of us might be better able today to live out our soul's true purpose. So we call out to the spirits to be with us here today, to join us in our gathering, and to inspire the questions and the answers. Thank you all for joining me here today. Today's conversation is about the power of the teacher. So in part 1 of this series, we talked about the love of the healer and how we move along in our life and we gather the love through the healer along our path. And then part 2 is about the warrior and how by living based on our beliefs and principles, we gain wisdom from the experience of life. And now the question is, the next part of our journey is, where does the power come from to make what we want to do with our life real? And in this system, the power comes from the teacher's ability to see through, to help you to see through your stories, the stories that define you, the stories that limit you, the stories that tell you what you can and can't do. So the teacher helps you to see through your stories, your small s stories, to the deeper truth of your soul, and helps you connect to your soul's longing. So what does that really mean? Well, most people just consider, and there's some people that don't even think that there's a soul, and that's okay. But a whole lot of people think that there's a body and it's infused by a soul, either for one lifetime or for many. But there tends to be in contemporary American life an idea that the body is somehow lower, and that it has these needs that are so problematic, and that the needs often lead to addictions and obsessions and seductions, and the body is a problem, but the soul arrives pure and clean, and life is just this struggle between these two. And the problem with that view is that it propagates the idea that there's a separation between anything, but particularly between the physical and the spiritual. And shamanic cultures don't believe that there is a separation. That idea is ridiculous to shamanic people. That there is, since shamanic people are operating out of their understanding of the system itself, the true energetic system underneath the illusions of our physical reality. They understand that everything is connected, everything is one. There is no real possibility for separation unless you create a story that tells you you're separation and that you're separated and that you live into that story. And so the idea of separation or the lie of separation is just another story that is layered on top of the deeper reality, which is that we're connected. So given that, the way shamanic peoples see the body and the soul relationship is that the body is a physical vehicle to carry the soul in the world, and that the soul does not arrive all pristine and perfect to struggle with the body, that the soul arrives in love with the body, in gratitude for the body, for being willing to carry it on its journey and give it hands and feet to do what needs to be done. Because the soul comes with a need. And that need is to express your soul's true, unique purpose, sometimes referred to as unique genius. And this is not, again, this is not about karma. Not that karma doesn't exist, but this isn't about karma. This is about the uniqueness of this life. And there is a lot in the principles that guide shamanic cultures and in the actions that they value that have precisely to do with how do we encourage the expression, the discovery and the expression in every individual of their gift, of their unique genius. And that as that unique genius is expressed in the community, those gifts become the wealth of the community, and they're shared by all. So that it's important to understand that from a shamanic perspective, your soul has the deepest need. And it's hard to feel that need before your survival needs are met, granted. But once your survival needs are met, then the soul's need begins to resonate in your life. It's resonating anyway, but it's just whether or not you're going to die is an issue you need to solve first. And then the question is, what am I living for? What is the purpose of my life? And what the teacher helps to bring into our lives is, where does the power come from to infuse me to be able to live out that soul's purpose? Excuse me. So the teacher then is 3 of the 4 archetypal energies, back to the whole concept we've been working with in this series, where each of these archetypal energies, it's necessary to have each of these archetypal energies be equally developed within us. In the relationship with these archetypal energies needs to be equally mature, and that they need to be healthy, equally healthy. Because we can be, for example, very healthy in our relationship with our professional self and very unhealthy in our relationship with our intimate self, or vice versa. So, we can have relationships with different aspects of ourself that are in varying degrees of health or codependency or addiction or whatever. And so what we're looking for in this work with these 4 archetypes is to cultivate mature, healthy, strong relationships with these 4 archetypal energies, because to do any soul's purpose, every single person will need to use all 4 of these energies. In other words, everybody will need sometimes to be a warrior. Everyone will need to be sometimes a teacher. Everyone will need to be sometimes a healer and sometimes a visionary. So, if you didn't hear part 1 and part 2 of this series, you can download them off the Voice America website, or you can find them on iTunes. In the meantime, we're going to talk about the teacher. And so the teacher, the energy of the heart. Oh, sorry, I forgot. This series is the series of the courageous heart. And so each archetypal energy connects with a power of the heart. And that power in the heart can be accessed when we are in love. Not as in love as in romantic love, but in terms of where we stand, where we resonate, how we are in our life in that moment that we are resonating with love. And when we're in love, in the teacher chamber of our heart, we can connect with the power of the teacher in the heart, which is power. And that is defined in shamanism as love in action. And so anything that isn't love in action is usually some version of power over. But basically, it's important to remember, as we're talking about power for this next hour, that in shamanism, power over isn't considered power. It's considered power over, and it has various and sundry names for different kinds of abuse of power. But abuse of power would never be referred to as power. And in our culture, in America, the abuse of power is what is referred to as power most of the time in general conversation. And that's one thing you could do in your life to begin to open up your relationship with the teacher, is just watch your use of the word power. and watch how often you use power when you really mean some abuse of power. And clean up your language and start to actually refer to it as whatever abuse of power it is, and let power simply be power. And so power is then that which I'm expressing and doing in the world from love. So the energy then of the heart for the teacher is the strong heart. And when we go into fear, the strong heart becomes weak. And in a state of weak-heartedness, we get addicted to perfection. So instead of feeling powerful, trusting the process, moving forward from a place of balance and wholeness, and engaging in the process of life with a passionate commitment to what's going on, and utterly unattached to what will happen, which would be the way we would move in a state of power. When we slip into fear and we become weak-hearted, instead of moving powerfully and pursuing an excellent expression of whatever we're doing, we get addicted to perfection, and we worry about the perfection of what we're doing. And some people would wonder what perhaps is the difference, but the difference has a lot to do with time. The only way I can discern something is perfect is if I have a preconceived idea of what perfect is. Excellence, I have no idea what excellence looks like. All I know is what it feels like, and all I know is the passion and the commitment and the power and the courageous heartedness that it takes to manifest excellence. And I don't know what it looks like until I get there. And it's usually better than I imagined, especially if I've engaged Spirit in helping me with it. Perfection is pre-programmed by past experiences or outside standards. And perfection, frankly, striving for perfection makes most of us a little bit crazy. And so the issue or the gift of the teacher then is a connection to true power in a shamanic sense. And what the teacher then connects us to is the energy of the sovereign within ourselves and the energy of the master in the sense of like the martial arts master, to have mastery over one's path, mastery over one's skills, mastery over the use of one's wisdom and love. So these are the energies that are associated with the teacher as well as the leader, to lead. So we'll talk more about these energies when we come back. Welcome back, everyone. And as the nice lady just reminded you, this is live Internet radio, and you can call in at 866-472-5795 or send me an email at Christina@lastmasscenter.org and let me know what your questions are about the teacher. So I forgot to do something last week, which I apologize for, and we'll do it again this week, which is much of this work owes a certain debt of gratitude to Angeles Arian for her excellent work in cross-cultural shamanism. In particular, she has a book called The Fourfold Way, and you can connect with her through angelesarien.com, which is ANGELESARRIEN.com. So, moving right along to the teacher. So each of the archetypes, as we have talked about each week, has life processes that they steward in our lives or that they help us to understand how to engage in. So, for example, with an archetypal energy like the lover, if you get into relationship, you don't necessarily know how to be in it without the lover there to help you. Intimate relationship, you don't exactly know how to do it. I worked with a woman once in a session, and she couldn't understand this pattern in her life. I think she was in her 30s. She could get into relationships beautifully. She could get out of relationships beautifully. But once she was in, she said, it's like I go brain dead. I don't know what to do. And eventually the guy just gets so frustrated with me, we end up breaking up. And she said, it's becoming ridiculous. And so when I did the shamanic healing work with her, what I found was that the part of her that was lost and split off was the lover. And once the lover was brought back, she was able to understand what to do between the beginning and the end and lived happily ever after, as far as I know, in the next relationship they got into. And so these archetypal energies are similar in that they hold the message, the program, the idea for how a human does, for a healer holds the healing energy. How does a human do warrior energy, and how does a human do teacher energy? So each of these energies then oversees certain processes that are archetypal processes that come up over and over and over again in life. And for the teacher, the primary challenge, the primary fear that must be faced as we come to terms with our own capacity as teacher within ourselves is trust. That we must resolve our own issues around trust to be able to work with the teacher. The teacher also oversees the life process of our willingness to passionately commit to the process of life without attachment to the outcome. And this is partly how we actually are able to stay focused on excellence and not collapse into worrying about perfection. There are other two energies which are simple words, but they are processes in life to create them. One is balance, to continuously be engaged in the process of balance. And balance is not, a place you find and buy real estate there. Balance is a very active process. When you see any athlete or dancer, ballerina, for example, on point, holding balance, it looks as if she's arrived in the perfect place. But the truth is, all facets of her body are working to constantly organize and reorganize to be able to be in that place of balance. And that's true for us in life. Things happen, weather occurs, and we have to rebalance ourselves. The fourth process that the teacher watches over in our life is the process of wholeness. And wholeness is largely defined within us based on our deep story about what spirit is, what the great creating spirit is, what is the big picture of wholeness. And so the teacher also helps us in cultivating a sense of wholeness within ourselves. A big part of shamanic healing that you access through shamanic healing is getting soul parts back so that you can feel whole within yourself. Many people feel empty, or they actually feel a whole, H-O-L-E. And the shamanic healing process of soul retrieval brings those parts back so a person can feel more whole in the sense of W-H-O-L-E. So these are the life processes that the teacher oversees. But really at the heart of transforming and healing and maturing your relationship with the teacher archetype is the resolution of whatever issues you have in this life around trust. And that from a shamanic perspective, all of life is teaching you. And sometimes life is the straightforward teacher, and sometimes life is teaching you as the trickster. And for many of us, we ask, why is this happening to me? And from a teacher perspective, that's not the right question. That the question is, what is the lesson? What is possible here for me to learn? Where is the potential here for growth or transformation? What is the purpose in this? What is the higher purpose in this? What is the adventure in this? That these are all much more viable teacher questions than why is this happening to me? Why isn't life fair? And why is my life beating me up? So the power of the heart is really about the courage to learn to ask the right questions, to perceive of your relationship to your life as an active adventure in self-discovery and self-expression, and that to work with the teacher energy to see through all the stories you've been handed about who you are and what power you get to express and who you get to be because you're a boy or who you get to be because you're a girl, how successful you get to be, how passionate you get to be, whether or not you get to be an artist, all of these programs that we get free of charge just by being born here. And the teacher is really helping us to have the courage to see through all of those stories, even those we are sure are reality, to face our fears, to trust the process, to see through those stories to discover the one true story that is being told for the first time in this life. Because that is the story of your discovery of your soul's purpose and your expression of that gift in the world, your search for and manifestation of the right vehicle or good vehicles to bring that soul's purpose into the world. And potentially, as you go through life and change and grow, how you choose a new vehicle that's even better able to bring that soul's purpose in the world, and that you refine and refine and refine the expressions of that true, unique genius as you move through the various phases of your life. And that this is the act of telling your story. And it's a unique story. It's a new story. It's never been heard of before. So an example of this, I was working with a client just yesterday, actually, and I was really actually struggling, which is a little bit embarrassing when I'm lying here. The client's right here. You know, we're supposed to be working with a shaman who knows what she's doing, and I'm narrating my journey as I go so the person can understand what's happening, and I'm not getting anywhere. And I realized that I'm not getting anywhere with the energies that I've encountered in this journey because I'm not asking the question from the right perspective. And because I'm not asking the question from the right perspective, I'm not getting any information. And it was very interesting for me to let go of the story that I'd been told by the client, to let go of the story I had in my own head based on that, just to let go of all the ideas I had about what was going on, and to really ask my helping spirits for a perspective from which I could begin to craft the right questions to get answers. And that is one of the things that we need to understand is one of the reasons people feel frustrated in not getting clear information from Spirit is that they're asking the wrong question because their perception of what's going on is inaccurate in the first place. And one of the main places I notice people are inaccurate in their sense of what's going on is that they don't trust the process of life. That fundamentally, at the core of everything that's happening, no matter what it is that somewhere there is a deep trust that the soul is here as a living expression of its unique genius. And that somewhere in the mess, somewhere in the brilliance, somewhere in the magnificence, somewhere in the sorrow, is always trusting that there is something in that is gold or can be mined for gold. And this is the great gift of the teacher, is helping us to rise out of the stories and open ourselves to living passionately committed to the process of life, trusting that what we need will be there, asking for help and all the other things we've learned from the healer and the warrior, but being able to engage with life in such a way that we can just be passionately committed to all that we're doing and unattached to the outcome. And that is a great challenge because that's where we get tapped into future time, whereas the addiction to perfection is where we get tapped into past time. And so the teacher is talking about balance and wholeness in the moment, trust in the process, passionate commitment, living fully in the now. And so the teacher's journey in life has a lot to do with completeness, and that we become a whole person as we begin to work with the teacher energy and ask, finally, why am I here, and what is my unique genius? And then we mobilize the power in the heart with love, and then the love of the healer and the power of the teacher create a balance within each other. So we're constantly tapping into the love and expressing it out as the power, tapping the love and expressing the power. In the same way, there's a dynamic between the warrior and the visionary, but we won't jump ahead because the visionary is for next week. So thank you all for listening, and we will be back in just a few minutes to talk some more about the shadow of the teacher. And this is one of my favorites, by the way, which is the righteous zealot. So we'll talk about this when we return. Thank you all for listening. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So I promised that the next section here we would talk about the shadow of the teacher. So let's talk just a little bit first about shadow. So we all know that in general that shadow energies are manifest in our life, and they're made out of aspects of ourself, which we actually need. These aspects of ourself are neither good nor bad. They're perfectly fine aspects of ourself, but they've been judged harshly. we've learned in life, based on usually people's reaction to us or to our actions, that that part of ourself is somehow perceived of as being bad or, I don't know, dangerous, or we should be afraid of it, or we should not like it, essentially. And because of that judgment that we have accepted from those who usually either hold the love or hold the food, we take that shadow, that aspect of ourselves that has been judged, and we shove it in the shadow closet, and we lock the door, and we try to never have to go back there. And so everything that is a shadow is really just an aspect of ourself, again, that is neither good nor bad. So what happens when we've done that within ourselves, and then we're in life, and the moment in life is calling out for teacher energy, and the teacher archetypal energy moves through us so that we can respond to the moment as teacher, because remember, the archetypal energies carry the program or the information for how do I respond in a moment in my life that's asking for teacher. So teacher archetypal energy moves through you, and you, if you had no fear, would respond as teacher in the moment, and then let that go and move on to the next moment. But when we've got aspects of ourself from fear and judgment shoved in the shadow closet, then when the teacher energy moves through us in response to the moment in front of us, it gets deflected by the fear out into other behaviors, other energies. And the shadow energies of the teacher are the righteous zealot. I just like saying that one, the righteous zealot. And the controller, the person who responds to the situation by controlling or endeavoring to control everything, and the judge. And so that's the person that judges others or judges him or herself, controls others or seeks to control him or herself. And the righteous zealot is not necessarily a position you take externally. It can be a position you take internally. But the issue itself is that you are positional and inflexible. That's the sort of the essence of the righteous zealot. And so these energies are all manifestations of the teacher archetype when it hits your own fear and gets shunted off into a shadow expression of the teacher. So another way to think about this is if we become weak-hearted about something, then we are expressing through fear, and that no matter our good intent, our good practices, our belovedness as a teacher, that if we've become weak-hearted about things and the energy moves through that fear, the teacher energy moves through that fear, it will come out in these abuses of power, which is the righteous zealot, the controller, and the judge. Really, no matter what our intent is, that if it hits the fear that we carry from our weak heart, it moves that way. In other words, it takes strength of heart to step up as the teacher, or in this, I think sometimes it's easier to understand teacher as master, as in the master of the dojo, that teacher who looks 40 years younger than they are because of their chi practices and is able still to knock down all the 24-year-old guys because their finesse and skill and development of chi is so amazing. So that's the master who has mastery over the skills of life is for this spiritual teacher. And then the energy then of the teacher is also the sovereign. It takes great strength to be a good sovereign, to be a good king or queen, and to establish dominion over your life. So if we want to take this down a notch to what one thing could you do? We already talked about one thing, but the second thing that you could do in this life to begin to connect with this teacher energy would be to choose to take space. It's one of the first things my first teacher taught me in energy work was that you must take space. You must choose energetically to take space and then show up in that space. And to do that is to establish sovereignty or dominion over yourself, your life, your energy, and that it's not helpful to other people for you to hesitate in that way, for you to not make the boundaries of your energy and yourself and your life clear to others. It's not helpful. It makes relationships very complicated and very confusing. And so the teacher is also a good leader. And so all of these energies talk about a certain level of mastery, a certain ability to take space in a good way, in a way that's good for all living things, and to lead when leadership is asked for. Not because you're over-identified with being a leader, but simply because that aspect of the teacher energy is being asked for. So another thing that happens when we move into a state of weak-heartedness about things is that we become positional and inflexible. We try to control the situation instead of trusting the process. And we judge what's going on, or we judge ourselves, which means that we are acting from the past and beginning to focus on whether things are perfect or not, and that we're not here in the present moment, just committed to the process and willing to be strong and to be powerful, to be creative, and let the excellence emerge from our strong-hearted commitment to the process. So one of the things to think about is, what are you weak-hearted about in life? I know a lot of people are really weak-hearted about their job. It's a very challenging thing for one's well-being to spend 8 hours a day in a situation you feel weak-hearted about, or more. Many of you work more than 8 hours a day. And so the issue is not always the job. I mean, sometimes the issue is what is necessary for me to feel strong-hearted in this job, or strong-hearted about this job. And so this is another reason, then, it would be lovely to have a working relationship with Spirit, because you could take this question to your helping spirits and ask for the process you needed to engage in to be able to resolve this weak-heartedness around your work or your relationship. Or, I mean, let's face it, sometimes parents feel weak-hearted about being parents. How do you change that dynamic in the heart? Well, one would be to work with your helping spirits, but even if you don't have helping spirits, the first thing to think about is, what is the single thing that when you do it, no matter what it is, when you do it, you feel strong-hearted? Because one of the things to do to cultivate a strong heart is to spend time in activities that help you feel strong-hearted. And it's the simplest way to begin to connect with a healthy relationship with the teacher. I have an email here that's come in from Christy in Minnesota that is saying, how do you change your perspective when you are looking from one where you cannot get answers from Spirit? That's a good question. But this is my sense of how the teacher helps us, because the teacher is always willing or able to help us to see the smallness of the story that we have running that's programming the perspective that we're seeing. And because if the perspective isn't working and not getting answers from Spirit, then our perspective is flawed. If our perspective is flawed, then the story that's defining reality for us is most likely flawed as well. And it's just sort of understanding that without a whole lot of blame or judgment, but just recognizing, if my questions aren't getting answers, the perspective they're coming from is probably flawed. So then the story I'm running that's defining reality is most likely flawed. And if that's the case, how far do I need to back up in the assumptions that I'm making about this situation or myself or reality? How far do I need to back up to get to something that I know is true? And, the beauty of the essence of the teacher energy through the strong-heartedness is it's connecting us to divinity. And it's connecting us to divinity because to find balance, to find wholeness, to really find sometimes what we can trust, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, to the wholeness from which all things came. And so sometimes with a teacher we have to back all the way up to the aspect of ourself that's connected to the divine and ask the divine's perspective on what's going on. Now, from a shamanic perspective, this can be very helpful because the divine is about the wholeness, the oneness, the connectedness of all things. It can be a little tricky sometimes if your sense of the divine is other than that. If your sense of the divine propagates your sense of separation, then it's very possible that that's the story that's causing you to have a perspective that doesn't allow you to get information from Spirit. I mean, if the story that you're running is that you're fundamentally flawed, you'll never be good enough, you must have someone else to communicate with the divine for you, it's actually very hard to figure out what the right question is if that's the given of reality. And so the beauty of the teacher is always bringing us back to that essence teacher, which is the place from which all things come. So the simple answer then to Christy's question is, how do you change your perspective, is you keep letting go of your stories layer after layer until you get back to something you know is absolutely true. And for me, sometimes it's divine, and frankly, sometimes it's the truth in my body. Because the body has wisdom, the emotions have wisdom, as does the mind and the spirit, and the body is the one of all of those that will not lie. So thank you all for being with me here this afternoon, and we'll be back for one more section to talk about the trickster and trust. Welcome back, everyone. We are talking today about the power of the teacher. It's the third part of a four-part series, and if you couldn't hear the beginning of today's show, remember that everything is on the website, and you can download it by tomorrow. You'll be able to download today's show, and Part 1 and Part 2, the Healer and the Warrior, are in the archives on the Voice America website, and they're also on iTunes. So we're talking about the teacher, and the life process of the teacher requires a willingness to forego the stories that you are comfortable in. Now, you're comfortable because they're familiar. They may require that you sell your soul for whatever, but they're comfortable. So these stories are comfortable because they're familiar, not necessarily comfortable because they soothe your soul or allow you to truly express yourself. So the teacher then is about this energy to have the willingness to forgo the stories that we have taken on for the possibility of who we become, and the ability to see through those stories layer after layer and let them go, so that we can simply be passionately committed to the process in the moment as it unfolds. And so strong-heartedness is not so much about having the courage of our convictions or being righteous or positional. That strong-heartedness is really about trusting. It's about trusting ourselves, trusting the experience of life, and trusting the process. That doesn't mean we have to like everything that's happening to us, but it means that somewhere in it we trust that there is meaning, that there is a value that can be found in that process. And one of the most challenging things about the teacher is that an aspect of the teacher is the trickster energy. And it's one of the beauties about actually living from a shamanic perspective, is that the shamanic perspective really honors and acknowledges and encourages a good, healthy relationship with the trickster, whereas many other systems try to pretend that the trickster doesn't happen, or worse, that if you're perfect and you follow all the rules, the trickster won't bug you. But the truth of the matter is that the trickster is, from a certain perspective, the reason we even have conscious thought. The trickster energy is that ability to forego the pattern, to forego the story, to forego the habit, to forego the way you think everything should be, for that possibility that something sacred could happen, that something else could happen, that willingness to forego your habit, to surrender more deeply to your soul, and to allow something unknown, something as yet unknown to you, to emerge. And the trickster has a tendency to come into our life when we're unwilling to do that, when we're clinging too tightly. We're too righteous and positional, too controlling and too judgmental, and thus holding on to the stories that no longer serve us, the ways of understanding ourselves that no longer serve us. The trickster has a tendency to slip into our life and to create a way of learning that will help us to laugh at that very part of ourselves that was the judge, to laugh and see more clearly about that very part of ourselves that was the controller, to stumble over and get frustrated with and ultimately expose and dethrone that righteous zealot that is reigning as a nasty sovereign over your life, that the trickster is the one who says, hello, people, the emperor has no clothes. And yes, I admit it. Sometimes it's messy in the process. But you know, the truth is some of the most lovely things in life are messy. Messy is not necessarily bad. Okay, messy is not always great if you're in a big conference with your boss or something like that. But the truth is, if it's truly trickster energy, a sense of humor, an apology, some graciousness, usually clears things, because the trickster is a sacred, sacred teacher. And the trickster is found in animal spirits, in different shamanic cultures. It's found in the sacred clowns in the Southwest. It's found in raven in the Pacific Northwest, and coyote coyotes everywhere, but in the plains. In Africa, there are several. One is the rabbit. That trickster energy came over and became the Brer Rabbit stories, and Brer Rabbit stories became Bugs Bunny. And Bugs Bunny is the ultimate trickster of the childhood of the baby boomers, right? So the trickster lives. It lives in our cartoons. It lives in our stories. It lives in our lives. And the truth of the trickster is the trickster loves you dearly, and loves who you came here to be. And the trickster comes in when you hold too tightly to stories you have lived out, to stories you are done with. And then it's time to recycle them, to let them go, and to open yourself through trust, through some balance, through some love you've gained from the healer, and ability to face your fears that you've gained from your warrior, some wisdom you've gained from your warrior, and to embark on your life, on your day, open to the unknown, unattached to the outcome. Stories make us attached to the outcome because we expect the story to play out. And so the trickster helps us when we're too attached to story to let go, to trust life, to know life is the great teacher. It is the only capital T teacher. And to embrace the teachings of life, the trickster teachings of life, and allow ourselves to be transformed into a new version of ourselves with greater alignment with our soul's purpose, greater alignment with our authenticity. So the aspect of this experience that shamanism offers us is the ability to begin to engage in cultivating this power to live without story, to live without attachment to the outcome, but to understand the skills of life and to live with a passionate commitment to those skills to manifest excellence. So what shamanism is helping us understand is how to gain that power, but to gain it with precision. And that's one of the distinctions between the offerings at Last Mass Center and many other shamanic trainings, or just other training programs that are all about, become powerful, empower yourself, be able to manifest everything you want in your life. That's all well and good, but what we're looking at Last Mass Center is really understanding power expressed with precision. That most people feel that if their intent is good, then there's nothing wrong with acquiring more power, and this is a very typically American worldview. But the deeper truth is that when we focus on acquiring more power without equal attention spent in deep personal transformation, our good intentions matter very little. And that in the training of this cycle of transformation, we focus on acquiring precision, so that precision without personal transformation can become aggression no matter how well-meaning we are. Excellence will become arrogance even when we intend compassion and kindness. And devotion in our work becomes spiritual ambition when we do not do the personal work to cultivate precision. And so I leave you with that, these thoughts about the teacher, and an opportunity to join us at Last Mass Center to discover about your relationship with the teacher in the cycle of transformation work. We give thanks to our ancestor spirits, to the earth, the sky, and the heart that unites us all. I remind you that if you need any information from Last Mass Center or you'd like a healing session with me, you contact Christina at lastmasscenter.org or simply check out the website, lastmasscenter.org. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and I look forward to next week where we will talk about the vision of the seer. the fourth archetype in our complement of archetypal energies. Thank you all. Have an excellent day.